How is everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel. Thanks for tuning in today. This is an educational channel. We try to let you know about great things, great theories, discoveries, and concepts that you um, don't know anything about because they've been suppressed, and they are things that are at the very margins and things that you wouldn't really know about unless you did a fair amount of digging. But if you did, they would accentuate your life, especially in terms of spiritual, mental, and physical health and personal sovereignty. And today is our 314th Bible decode. We've been decoding generally the New Testament. We're getting more to the Old Testament later. But we've been exploring, several suppressed uh, perspectives on the New Testament that might shed some light on how you should be reading your New Testament. The Roman origins hypothesis, the lens of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the lenses of mythology and astrology, um, entheogens. Um, we've been looking at numerology, and we are in particular, we're kind of a little bit back to the Roman origins hypothesis, but we're going in a little bit on a different angle by looking at some of this work of Roman Piso, who's a writer, and I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he talks about, but I do believe that he's got a novel approach that should not be dismissed, as it has been by many people. The basic approach that he uses is that he just basically assumes that all of the ancient texts, regardless of topic, are written by the royal families and their servants and court members. So nobody throughout ancient times was writing anything except for the royals. And so they used a myriad of different pen names and aliases to kind of cover up that fact that it was just a very tiny number of people who were writing all of these various texts. And they obscured these things through using coded language, especially alias names. They would permutate their names. All of these royals generally had a number of different names to start with because they had names that honored some of their famous ancestors, and so they might have 5 or 6 names, and they would use those various names and switch around some vowels and consonants, or switch languages from Roman to Latin to Greek, or to Hebrew, or Egyptian, or Phoenician, or and these were things that could be understood by other royals, other people with that kind of training and that kind of inside knowledge, but the average person wouldn't be able to understand it. And they did the same with a lot of the texts, including the New Testament, and including the works of Josephus, who Roman Piso claims is one of his ancestors, named Arius Piso, who was the author of Josephus, as well as being the author of the Gospels. So, and he attempts to demonstrate this by, switching around their names, decoding their names, and really kind of reconstructing this person's life, Arius Piso. Interestingly enough, Arius Piso never really does enter the historical record. You only can infer his life by, kind of putting together all the breadcrumbs, all the clues that you can grasp from the various letters that have been written from other of the famous Romans. Now, the Piso family was a very powerful Roman aristocratic family, also known as the Little Caesars. And so, but this particular member of the family kind of slips through our grasp unless we, kind of decode the various letters written by people like Pliny the Younger and Tacitus and Trajan and other people, all of whom were kind of in on the game, in on the particular psychological operation that the Romans were engaging against the Jews, which took the form of the New Testament. The New Testament was the long game, the long psychological operation that the Romans used against the Jews in order to try to mellow them out, to try to make them conform by replacing the Jewish Messiah that they were waiting for, the military commander who was going to help them overthrow the conquering power in Judea, and replacing that Jewish Messiah with a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace and believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and walking the extra mile and turning the other cheek, and then at the same time going against his Jewish brethren by overturning the tables of the money changers and castigating the Jewish merchants who were selling small animals on the outer reaches of the temple, and encouraging his Jewish followers to abandon their families to follow him. These are things that strike at the heart of the Jewish traditions and rituals, which is what the Romans wanted to do. And then as you get further along in the Bible, into the Pauline epistles, Romans through Hebrews, then you can see that Paul is even more pro-Roman and anti-Jew than Jesus even was. So almost as if they were written by the Romans, which is exactly what Roman Piso, Abelard Reuchlin, Joseph Atwill, Henry Davis, James Valiant, Michael Menescott, Bruno Bauer, Sir Ronald Syme, James Valentine Hannay, and I'm probably forgetting a few, Cliff Carrington, Ralph Ellis, they have all, basically fingered Josephus as the true author of the New Testament. Now, some of them believe that Josephus actually existed. In this case, Roman Piso believes that Josephus was just a pen name of one of the Piso family members, in this case Arius. But other parts of the New Testament were written by other family members. A lot of his children and grandchildren participated, along with his younger foster brother named Pliny the Younger. Now, Roman Piso claims that he's written about 37 books, which I believe, because he is definitely prolific. He says that many of those books were destroyed or lost in various computer mix-ups and so on, website mix-ups and stuff. But he still does have a few of those book-length, those books as articles that he puts up on ResearchGate, along with many other articles. I think he's got almost 200 articles up there. So to think that he could have written 37 books isn't too much of a stretch for me. But I've read certainly over 100 of his articles. And, I'm not totally convinced by what he says, but I think it's instructive. And I certainly do have a soft spot for his method that some people like Joseph Atwill were pretty dismissive of. Sometimes when you don't have the evidence, you gotta piece it together with whatever you can get. You know, if you have to get one clue over here and another clue over there, that might be what you need to do. And that's kind of how I wrote my dissertation, and that's history, that's U.S. history, you know, so it's a little bit different, but it's the same kind of concept. If you're trying to research people that are not really appearing in the historical record, you have to use creative methods. Now when Joseph Atwill does his research, he's pretty much doing just literary criticism. So he's just reading Josephus and he's reading the New Testament and kind of comparing them, throwing in a little bit of history here and there. But so his sources are, you know, right out in the open and easy to grasp, assuming that, you know, assuming that the translation of Josephus that we have is actually something that just wasn't concocted in the last 30 years or something, which is possible, but I don't think so. You know, his sources are on very solid ground. In this case, Roman Piso's sources are, you know, somewhat suspect, but you can see what he makes of it and just take it all with a grain of salt, and you know, take it into your mind and see how it mixes with the other stuff that's already in there, and you know, verify it. Don't trust it, but also don't reject it out of hand. And so now he's talking about this character named Marcion, who he claims was Arius Piso, and Arius was a descendant of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and so he uses Mark or Marcus as one of his names. So for him to use the name Marcion is certainly not any type of stretch. Marcion was a 2nd century Gnostic who some claim was the author of the first gospel, or maybe the first one to be discovered. The Gospels are claimed to have been written in the 70s, 80s, and 90s AD, you know, still 40, 50, 60 years after the events. But they were really never discovered or discussed by any of the church fathers until at least 150 or so AD. So we're talking still now 120 years after the events. And one of the first was this Gospel of Marcion, and if you look at it, which I have it, it's on my docket to read, but apparently it's about 75% the same as the Gospel of Luke. So that's very instructive, especially when you recognize how much the Gospel of Luke is dependent upon Josephus for its decoding, and that how many parallels there are between the Gospel of Luke and Josephus's work, War of the Jews. And I would really like, when I do get around to reading Marcion, to see how many of those parallels between Josephus and Luke also remain in Marcion, and especially the all of the parallels that you can graph them. You can literally graph them on a chart, which conceals reveals 5 letters in Latin, the initials of the authors. The authors, the Roman authors of the New Testament, literally signed their names to the book of Luke. APTVS. Arius Piso, Titus, Vespasian, not sure exactly, but those are kind of the main suspects for the writing of the New Testament, Arius Piso, and then the 2 emperors, Titus and Vespasian. the first two Flavian emperors from 69 until 81 AD. Okay, so let's go over this Marcion a little bit. The name and character of Marcion appears to have originated with Arius Piso, using his mark or Marcus portion of his name. However, he often passed on this creative concepts and material to be later given by his descendants. Marcion of Sinope was supposed to have been born around 85 AD, and he is supposed to have died about 160 AD. He supposedly began his teaching in Rome around 144 AD. He rejected the Hebrew Bible and the God of Israel, precisely in line with Arius Piso's projection of the subject, as he wanted to destroy the old religion and replace it, which is all part of this Roman psychological operation, basically to destroy Judaism and replace it with this new Jewish Messiah Christianity version. The first, or among the first, to have made mention of Marcion was Justin Martyr, who was, he has revealed, was Justus Calpurnius Piso, Arius' son. Abelard Reuchlin, the author of the true authorship of the New Testament, who also believes that Arius Piso was the author of the New Testament, or of the Gospels at least. Even though he does not appear in the historical record, Abelard Reuchlin independently came up with the same conclusions as Roman Piso by doing this kind of detective work that I was talking about. So Abelard Reuchlin regarded Marcion, saying, later, when Justus Piso wrote as Justin Martyr a few years prior to his death, and before Arian, the grandson, wrote Second Maccabees, he had created the heretic Marcion, an evil alter ego of himself. Now, all of these church fathers are claimed by Piso to Roman Piso to have been relatives of the Piso family and all in on it. Basically, the whole idea was to create, because their attempt to create this Christian church kind of was a flop. It didn't work. They barnstormed. They wrote the Gospels as plays, and they performed them in front of the illiterate slaves and Roman soldiers and Jews that they could all over the place. And this was really like 100 to 110 AD primarily, and it didn't really get off the ground. And so for the next almost 200 years, they kind of conducted Christianity just on paper, with all of these different church fathers creating various controversies, making it seem like there were believers, making it seem like it was something that people were passionate about, and that they had arguments between one view and another, one book and another, and so on. And also they had all of these bishops of Rome, and eventually they became popes. They were all also relatives of the Pisos, and they were just on paper as well, making it seem like the Christian church was coming right along and had an infrastructure and a governing body and so on, when it didn't, up until the 4th century, early 4th century, when Constantine made it part of the state, the Roman state, or the emperor. Okay, so he says, I'd say that Arius Piso invented the character of Marcion, and then let his son Justus Piso play that part. Something similar to what appears to have been done for his grandson Flavius Arrianus, who wrote about Epictetus. who I believe is one of the early Stoics, to promote the idea of Stoicism. Ancient royals created the idea of Stoicism. That goes back to the Greeks, as far as I know. Diogenes, and maybe he was a cynic. But those are kind of the two major strains of thought that flow through the Gospels, that are classical: Stoicism and Cynicism. And a lot of that comes from Seneca the Younger, and then it goes back to Diogenes, and most of there really isn't anything in the New Testament that is like original. All of it is derivative of either the Stoicism, Cynicism, Greek and Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology, pagan, especially the pagan mystery schools, Gnosticism. All of this stuff it's all kind of like a kitchen sink type of approach in the New Testament. They just put it all in there. Emperor Probus wrote as Church Father Malchion. R and L are exchange letters. That is, they were interchangeable. C and CH was used to disguise the name between Marcion and Malchion. Those two were also interchangeable. Eutropus, father of Emperor Julius Constantinus Tius Chlorus, who was given the title of Pope as Felix I. He wrote as Gregory and T. Claudius Marcion. He was Emperor Constantine's grandfather. Basilides, supposed early Gnostic teacher in Alexandria, Egypt, from 117 to 138, which are precisely the time period that Hadrian was the emperor, claimed to have inherited his teachings from Saint Matthias, an apostle. Well, to me, that info says that the individual was given a playbook from Arius Piso, Flavius Arrianus. So I can't confirm any of that, but it's interesting to speculate upon. Flavius Arrianus, who also wrote as Appian, and as the famous astronomer Claudius Ptolemy. Basilides was supposed to have been a pupil or student of Menander and or Peter Clausius. When these people using these created names and characters say such things, they are alluding to the fact that they were related to the individuals using those names or identities. Cerdo, too, was supposed to have been a follower of Menander. Menander, supposed follower of Simon Magus, who was one of the early Gnostics, and appears in your New Testament in certain places. Justin Martyr is the oldest source for Menander. Menander is mentioned by Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Tertullian, all of whom were early church fathers of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and all of whom are family members of the Pisos. Since Justin Martyr, also known as Justus Calpurnius Piso, gives us some info about Menander that seems to have unique corollaries to his father, Arius Piso, Menander may have been another alias of his father. For instance, he says that Menander proclaimed himself the Messiah and vowed to defeat the angels in this royal language, the language that the royals used to communicate over the heads of the common people. Angel, according to him, means high priest. Now, if you read some of the work of Mauro Bellino, he uses angel. I believe the Hebrew anyway for angel is malachim, and that is more like an agent or an asset or an emissary of one of these Elohim, one of the gods with a small g, or Anunnaki is another way that you would say that. So now it could be that the term angel has a different meaning in the New Testament than it does in the Old Testament, because we have an entirely different system of propaganda that's going between the two. But anyway, his official royal name, Arius, was Marcus Antonius Arius Calpurnius Piso. Writings, so he wrote as Josephus, but he also wrote as Appian. Arius turns into Appian, and then Josephus has a book called Against Appian. So this is a big debate that they have between Appian and Josephus, when in actuality both of them are the same person. So he's just it's a hoax. He's creating a controversy where none exists, where he wrote a reply in opposition to himself, meaning he was playing both parts, even while doing so revealing himself via a variant of his actual name. Arius Piso was, within his new religion, both Christ and his adversary Satan, that is, the Antichrist. So, this whole Roman origins hypothesis throws considerable cold water on the entire idea of Christianity as being a total fiction, but it also throws that same cold water on Satanism as being a total fiction as well. Two birds with one stone. And really, it also strikes at the heart of Islam when you get into it, as well as Judaism. And I think it even takes a few dents out of the other of the five major Western religions, being atheism and or scientism and or communism, by showing that a lot of the ancient scientists were also frauds. Okay, Julius Piso, Arius' son, who was kind of not in on the game and really not in favor of this psychological operation. He was the author of the Book of Revelation. And the Book of Revelation is really supposed to be an expose on what actually was going on, so that people could the average person could figure this out. He used the phrase Antichrist as a hint at his father, as Jesus was also the New Testament Satan. Younger foster brother of Arius was Pliny, because when his biological father died, Arius's father's brother, Lucius Piso, married Pliny's mother and adopted him. So that's a little bit complicated, but they were more or less brothers by marriage. When Arius Piso's father was forced into suicide by Nero, now his father was named Gaius Piso, and he was in on the original plot to create a universal religion, and they proposed the whole thing to Emperor Nero in an earlier period, and Nero wouldn't go for it. This includes Arius's father, Gaius Piso, his brother, his uncle Lucius Piso, and also Seneca the Younger, who had been Nero's tutor when Nero was a young child, and also the writer Lucan. And so Nero got wind of this, Nero rejected their idea, and they tried to assassinate Nero. And Nero got wind of that, and so he had them all executed. Seneca was executed, so was Gaius Piso, and Lucan in 65 AD. And so they say he was forced into suicide by Nero in 65 AD. Lucius Piso married Arrius Piso's mother, and then the two sons became brothers. In order that his property not be seized by the government, that was Gaius Piso. So that was pretty much the choice that he made to commit suicide. That enabled his family to maintain their property. So Gaius Piso was given the option of saving that for his family by Nero by committing suicide. Okay, now we're back again to the church fathers. Irenaeus, who was mid-2nd century church father, he wrote Against Heresies, which was anti-Gnostic. And we must remember that this was a way for them to keep Christianity alive in the form of literature when no churches actually existed, and to paint the illusion that there were indeed Christians who were passionate about their beliefs. Titus Antoninus, also known as Emperor Antoninus Pius, who was the grandson of Arrius Piso, he was also known as Suetonius, the historian, whose work he wrote a work called The 12 Emperors, and in that work, his chapter on Emperor Domitian, who was the third Flavian emperor from 81 to 96 AD, he describes the throne room of Domitian, like what's going on in his throne room, and the imagery that he gives for the throne room of Domitian is identical to the imagery revealed in the book of Revelation. Antoninus Pius, grandson of Arrius Piso, via his daughter Claudia Phoebe, who was also known as Pompeia Plotina, and that he was Emperor Trajan's wife. So Trajan was in on this whole thing as well. He's not technically a Flavian emperor, but he came after the Flavians from 98 until 117 AD. Antoninus Pius was the pope from 137 to 161 AD. And he was also Pope Pius the First, and he wrote as Suetonius. In Irenaeus' Against Heresies, he deliberately misspells Jesus' name, or Christos, this time as Christos with an E added in front of the